Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Crypto Hot Seat interview show brought to you by TokenMetrics.com. As always, Crypto Hot Seat is the only interview show that matters in crypto, and I'm very, very pleased to be joined today by Mr. Paul Budnitz. Paul, happy days to you, man.
Hey, thanks, Dylan. I'm super psyched to be here.
Paul is the CEO and founder of Superplastic, which is they basically are making NFT cartoon celebrities. There's a lot of fun, creative stuff happening out of their office in Burlington. Pleased to have Paul on the show to talk to him and learn more, not just about Superplastic and the 2 NFT drops they have going on today, but a little bit about what it's like to just be a creative person doing business in 2022. So, Paul, I feel like we should probably start by talking about Kid Robot. To me, it seems like your experience with this business was what set the stage for getting into Superplastic. Could you tell us a little bit about your business before your current business?
Yeah, totally. So I founded Kid Robot basically because I was traveling in Asia and fell in love with all these crazy toys that were coming out of Hong Kong and also out of Tokyo, that artists were making these really like small run toys and selling them like 100 at a time. They were mostly handmade. And I was like, fuck, I have to do that. So I came back to the States and started Kid Robot to do that. And Superplastic came out of Kid Robot only in that after 8 or 10 years of Kid Robot. And I sold Kid Robot in 2012, 2013. We kept getting offers from ridiculously large Hollywood studios to make TV shows and movies. And in fact, we made a lot of money for stuff that either wasn't made, got tabled because we didn't realize it was being bought because it was competitive with some other thing out there. Or it just takes fucking forever. And it's amazing how incompetent Hollywood could be. And so Superplastic came out of like, well, you know, the other half of what I always love to do, and the people who work with me love to do, is to make animation. And it was like, well, what if we just made our own animated like universe, but instead of depending on these massive studios to tell us what to do, we could just make our characters famous on social media. And when we did that, we could do anything we wanted. So we did that, and weirdly it worked.
Very good. What is your crypto origin story here? Did you start getting into crypto during your time at Kid Robot, or how did you connect the dots between what you were doing at Kid Robot and the crypto world at large?
Well, to be really honest, about I don't know how long, 2016. I was at like a friend had flown me out to some conference of creative people. And I was sitting there and there was this guy with incredibly long fingernails and like really weird steampunk glasses who claimed to be one of the people who started Bitcoin. And I just said, that shit is so fucking stupid. I thought it was I was like, this shit is stupid and it's going to be dumb and it's going to go away. And we ended up getting drunk and he convinced me to buy $50,000 worth of Bitcoin when it was at a price that you wouldn't believe.
Yeah. So it worked out, basically.
It worked out. Yeah. I mean, it was like, but I can't claim being smart. I literally was just really drunk and he convinced me to do it. And then after that, and then I got it. And I was like, oh my God, this is going to change the world. And I've been totally into it. And then the same thing happened with NFTs. Not more than, I don't know, man, like a little more than a year ago. Like investors and people who I know, and also the Nifty Gateway guys were like, you guys should get into NFTs. And I was like, this shit is stupid. Like people selling JPEGs to other people is so fucking dumb. I was like, this is the dumbest shit in the world. And then like the same thing happened. I was like, and then suddenly it's something, this is just the way with me, something snapped. And I was like, oh, this is kind of everything. I was like, oh, this shit is everything. And so I get it now. Essentially, it pervades everything we're doing. And I mean, I'm admitting like my own stupidity, but the reality is like, in a half joking way, I guess. But the reality is, it's just like, as far as I'm concerned, this is really what's going to change everything in the world that I'm in. Everything. Already is.
I want to ask you about what was your experience of that Beeple story in which Beeple sold an NFT? I forget the exact number, but it was something approaching $60 million, and it was covered everywhere by the New York Times and all this. What was your experience of that news? Were you already doing Superplastic at that time?
We were, and actually we were doing NFTs already with Nifty Gateway. Our first before we started doing our own platforms and our own stuff, we just started out like a lot of people did at Gateway, just because we were learning, you know. And yeah, and Superplastic is primarily a creative company. We are not really a technology company, but we appropriate technology to do insane shit, essentially. So for me, it was like, I was looking at the Beeple thing going, wow, like, isn't that, I think it was like one of the most expensive works of art ever sold by a living artist or something.
It was up there for sure.
Yeah. And I have a degree in art and in fine arts. And I was like, that's kind of insane, you know, but, and so I think my reaction was sort of similar. It was like, I don't know how that's going to play out, because my basic interest in this is not in the big dollar values for single works of art. My real interest is the way that this technology completely changes a lot of the creative landscape in much smaller ways, actually.
Well, yeah, well, one big way that I can think of, I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about the relationship between NFT technology and this kind of new ability for creative people to protect their intellectual property rights. I don't know, some people who are operating in a more technical sphere might not realize it, but if you're a professional photographer, for example, it's up to you to protect your own copyrights. There's nobody out there doing it for you. So I'm so curious to hear any thoughts you might have about NFT technology's ability to kind of work as an authentication mechanism, really make sure that if somebody says they created something, they actually did create it.
Right. Well, and the interesting thing is, if you think about what's behind that question, it has to do really with the value of something having provenance, knowing who owns it. Because I mean, it's the same thing as I can go to Chinatown right now and buy a Louis Vuitton bag that is really hard to tell from the real Louis Vuitton bag, and the price, by, you know, at least until you really hold it, and then the price will be 5% what the real bag is, right?
Sure.
And so the question really is like, it has to do with the value of things, and the value of things having value because they you can trace them all the way back to whether it's a creator, or in the case of, let's say, a bag or something, or Superplastic, a brand, right? Or I guess in our case, creators too, because our creators are actually synthetic characters, right? They're actually the creators of our NFTs and stuff. And so if you can trace something back to something that Googieman or Janky made, does that, you know, one thing I'm grateful for is that people care, and that creates value. And yeah, I mean, I think that the fact that it creates a provenance stream is really exciting. To me, it's actually the control and sometimes the lack of control over the blockchain that actually creates even more value. It's not, because if you talk about provenance, you're saying, well, the past value of this has partly to do with its origin, right? But what I'm most interested in is actually the future value having to do with the fact that if you've got something original, you know, there's more stuff that's going to come because you're
sure.
Now you're connected. I mean, that the better way to say it would be that, like, NFTs specifically and the use of blockchain for art is, to me, the first time that you can actually create a work of art that exists reliably over time. It creates a time element into the creation of art. So you got paintings behind you, and those paintings were created, and then they're done. Okay, you can replicate them and do prints of them or whatever. But the difference between that and, let's say, an NFT is that, like, the NFT version, not only can it change over time, it can lead to other things over time. And those things can be more NFTs, they can be experiences, they can be other blockchain-y, really interesting stuff. They can be money if you want them to be, but they can also just be awesomeness. So to me, I think the real value with the artist is actually how it pushes ahead into the future, less about provenance in the past, which I think there is value there, but that's just my that's my thing.
It's exciting to think about what's coming in the future. I'd love to talk a little bit about what you guys are actually doing right now. So if anybody's curious about Paul and his company, check out superplastic.co. And I mean, how do you describe your company's creative output here? It's like zany, chaotic cartoon characters. How do you describe this stuff without actually showing it? I guess showing it is probably a big part of that question. Huh?
Well, we have animated characters: Janky and Googieman, Daisy, Stax, Shoe Dog, Cranky. We have a bunch. You could think about us as Marvel, or a really fucked up version of Disney. We're definitely not even rated PG. We push the edge a lot. mainly because I've done so much stuff and I'm at the time of my career where I can do whatever the hell I want and I don't really care. So,
Awesome. Yeah.
So the stuff we push the edge a lot. The deal is that, like, say, take Janky and Googieman, who are sort of our oldest and our most popular. I mean, we have like 10 million followers and growing very fast.
Yeah, man.
And so they not only do they have all these followers that they get to talk to, not only do they have like incredibly interesting, fucked up and funny things happen in their lives, which you can follow on TikTok or Instagram. You can also talk to Janky on Discord or on, you know what I mean? Like they interact in the real world, just like, I mean, it's the connection that a lot of people have with, let's say, Janky, Googieman, or Daisy isn't really different than the connection they might have with Tyler, the Creator, you know? And you're not often meeting Tyler, the Creator on the street anyway. But
yeah, this conversation kind of makes me, and I don't know all the details here, but I know that I think it's Japan in particular, there's a precedent for virtual celebrities that don't exist at all.
Yeah.
And people actually have some kind of technology-enabled relationship with them.
Yeah, but I mean,
how familiar are you with this stuff?
Is this... Obviously, it's what I do, so I'm familiar with it.
Yeah, but I'm curious about while we're talking about cutting-edge NFT stuff, it's interesting to me that there is still a historical precedent here.
Right.
It seems like what you're doing is kind of setting the stage for the next evolution of that stuff.
Well, and even more than 100 years ago, you have like Marcel Duchamp, who created Rose C'est La Vie. I mean, he created an alternative ego. They created art, that wrote books. You know what I mean? They did all this. They gave interviews, and so it's really, to me, it's just really continuing on with that whole thing. I don't know. I mean, the interesting thing about technology now is not only, I mean, I'm told that with our NFT sales at Christie's and this last drop, someone just told me that like Janky and Googieman are now the top selling virtual artists in history, in the many millions of dollars, because they've designed the lion's share of every NFT we've dropped. Right? They're the artists.
Yeah, super interesting.
Yeah, and so it's really interesting. But the other thing is, because of technology, like we're opening a store in New York City in a few months. Well, you know, it's got a back room that you can only get in with NFTs. But the other connection, again, it comes back to like the characters who, in the more real world, the holographic technology is so strong now that they can actually start to appear. They're actually starting to appear places physically, and so that the line between what's just happening on your phone and what's happening in your life, that's sort of this company's goal. Isn't the metaverse? It's like everything. It's being in your life with products and being in your life with like all the beautiful stuff we make and all the virtual stuff. I mean, Janky and Googieman were both playable characters in Fortnite this last year.
Oh wow, yeah. Talk about some exposure and mainstream cutting through.
And
there.
And Daisy went to Paris Hilton's wedding, and just you know what I mean, and is working with Paris and is dropping NFTs with Paris. So it's a whole thing.
Well, that's all very interesting. I want to kind of unpack that fucked up Disney soundbite that you talked about, because your geographic location is interesting to me. When people hear us, like, here's a creative studio that's kind of a fucked up response to Disney, they're probably thinking New York, LA, maybe Austin, Texas. Right. You're operating out of Burlington, Vermont. Could you talk a little bit about what it's like to have when I think of Burlington, I think of Ben and Jerry's, right. Really.
Everyone seems to think of like Barns and Cows.
Yeah. What can you tell us about having a city like Burlington as your creative home base?
Well, I lived in New York forever, and Kid Robot was based in New York City. And eventually I felt personally like I was becoming a little ingrown, which is what happens to you in the city after a while. Mm-hmm. And so moved up to Vermont temporarily, and then ended up falling in love with it and just meeting amazing people. So the nice thing about being in a small city, besides the fact that we have access, you know, we're 90 minutes from Montreal, and we go to New York all the time. It's that the creative community, while you don't get everyone in the world, what you do get is real community. So it just feels like people are there to help you with what you're doing. The creative community is small, so we all know each other and we all support each other. And the other great thing, I guess, is that it's a pretty awesome place to live. It's a very weird place with lots of weird, interesting people in it. And I can't imagine trying to do a company like this let's say in the Bay Area where fucking Meta or Google is showing up and grabbing all your employees all the time. I mean,
Yeah,
you know
yeah.
what I mean?
So I'd love to get into this with you a
Yeah.
little bit because
And we don't do
because
remote work. We're even weirder. Like we, as a
yeah.
company, we all came to an agreement that we weren't doing the Zoom remote worker thing. So we're the opposite of Twitter. Like if you want to go work from your home, you can go work for Twitter and that's great. But if you want real community and really to grow creatively and you want to actually have fun at your job and go in and like be working next to amazing people, that's what we do.
Yeah, right on. So the business that you've got, you obviously have some take on the metaverse, and we talked a little bit before recording. You're not the biggest Facebook or Meta fan in the world, so I want to ask you about what would it take for a singular metaverse to emerge as like a capital M metaverse? What we talk about when we talk about virtual reality.
Well,
there are a few out there,
right.
you know, Decentraland, Sandbox, and so on. How do they win? How does one of these companies win? It can't be a centralized thing like Meta.
Well, the dream of Web3 is that no one wins, right? I mean, the thing about Web2 is that, or 0 or 1 or whatever everyone wants to call it, is that you end up with these giant monopolies because of the network effect, right? So if I'm on Meta's platform, I'm fucking stuck on Meta's platform, and Meta's motivated not to let me get off their platform, right? Mm-hmm. Because so everything is like locked, and everything's going to be locked in. Clearly, like if the guys at Animoca are amazing people, and we're close with them, they're really committed to the open web. And so, if truly assets become, if standards show up that means that when you have a Superplastic NFT, it's transferable to Sandbox or to Sand. You know what I mean? You can transfer it to all these different metaverses, and that becomes an open thing. The right answer is it's all the fucking metaverse, and you move amongst all these things, and they're interlinked and connected, just like the real world is. Just like I can drive from Burlington to Montreal for lunch, and I don't and it's not a replication of the limitations of the physical world where I'm here like working, you know what I mean? And you're there wherever you are. And so that's the ideal answer. I prefer, frankly, for nobody to win, because if you end up with one person winning, you may be one standard that wins for a while until someone comes up with something else. But if you end up with one person winning, we're just back with the same bullshit we have right now.
Yeah. I quite like this way of looking at it. The Decentraland versus Sandbox and so on. It's not about one metaverse. These are all different destinations within one metaverse.
Yeah, man, if those guys are smart, and I think the Animoca guys are really smart, they would all be working together with each other. And unfortunately, the way capitalism works and the way network effects works is you want to close off your world so you can't let people move from one thing to the other. You don't want things to be transferable. But the fact of the matter is, when they are transferable, you win by being better. You don't win by being a monopoly. And that's why why people like find our, Meta calling itself Meta is like almost embarrassingly not getting the whole fucking idea. It's like, really? You're not getting it. The point is all this shit should shut you down.
Yeah, it definitely seems within Facebook's purview to assert itself as the center of the universe, whether or not that's actually true.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, man,
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's
I'd love to close this by talking a little bit about the and you've got 2 NFT drops basically going on right now. What can you tell us about Head Trips, and what can you tell us about this Gucci collaboration?
Well, Head Trips came about because it came actually out of the Janky heist. So Janky and Gugimon back in August robbed Christie's, and they stole a bunch of art, and then they sold that art off as NFTs, and they actually blew up the building in the process. I can't believe we convinced Christie's to let us do that, but we did. They did. And now they're on the lam, and they're bored out of their mind, and they're like basically locked in the basement. And so Daisy showed up with a bunch of pills. Told you we're not rated G, but with a bunch of vitamins. And so basically Janky and Gugimon they sold off the vitamins. They sold off the pills. And so basically you basically need one of our NFTs to participate, and you can buy, there's still pills on the market, though that drop sold out last week. Sold out actually right away. you can take pills and they generate a different level of trip depending on what pill you get. And the worse the pill, the more fucked up the trip, the more intense the NFT that comes out of it. And unlike, I think, these NFTs aren't just works of art, although I think they're really, really beautiful. They're tickets to everything that we do, from our store to things our characters are doing to a lot of future stuff, and including tickets to the Gucci drops. So tomorrow we're dropping 500 NFTs with Gucci that come with handmade porcelain sculptures that were designed by Gucci and Janky together, and that are created in Milan, Italy. So you get both, and the drop is tomorrow afternoon. But you need one of our other NFTs to participate in all of it. Part of it's open to the public, part of it's Gucci's community, and part of it is locked up for our community. So
right on. Well, let's wrap this thing up. Thanks for joining us on the show. And for all the audience out there, our guest today has been Mr. Paul Budnitz. Paul is the founder and CEO of the NFT creative entertainment company called Superplastic. You can read and learn more about his work at superplastic.co. Thanks for joining us on the show, Paul.
Awesome. Thanks, Dylan.